Welcome back, you beautiful, unbreakable force of nature. Sit down for this one, because what I'm about to tell you is going to shift everything you thought you knew about the past 5 years of your life. Someone just broke the silence. Someone just cracked under the weight of their own guilt. Someone from that circle, that group, that family of smiling faces who swore they had your back just confessed everything they did behind it. And I mean everything. The meetings they had about you when you weren't there, the group chats where your name was the headline, the plans they made, the lies they coordinated, the stories they rehearsed together before facing you with those warm, trustworthy eyes. It's all out now, spilled like poison from a cup they can't put back together. And honestly, you deserve to know every single twisted detail of it. They thought you'd never find out, didn't they? They thought their secret pacts were ironclad, that their whispered conversations would stay buried in the archives of their cowardice. They believed they were so clever, so coordinated, so untouchable in their little conspiracy against your peace. But here's what they forgot. Here's what they always forget when they build their houses on lies and manipulation. Eventually, someone's conscience starts rotting from the inside out. Eventually, the guilt becomes so heavy that keeping the secret hurts more than releasing it. Eventually, one of them breaks, and when they do, the whole structure comes crashing down like a house of cards in a hurricane. And that's exactly what just happened. One of them couldn't take it anymore, couldn't sleep another night with the weight of what they participated in, and they came forward with a confession so detailed, so disgustingly thorough that it's about to rewrite your entire understanding of the past. Let's start with the meetings, because that's where this whole thing began, in rooms you were never invited to, at tables where your name was served like the main course. They didn't just talk about you casually, no. They strategized about you. They analyzed your every move, your every post, your every word, like military generals planning an operation. They studied your patterns, your vulnerabilities, your triggers, and they documented everything with the precision of people who had made you their full-time project. These weren't random conversations or innocent concerns. These were calculated sessions designed to control the narrative around your life. They decided together what story the world would hear about you, what version of events would become the truth, what pieces of your character they would erase, and what flaws they would magnify until they became your entire identity in everyone else's eyes. The confessor, the one who finally broke. They described these meetings with the kind of detail that makes your stomach turn. They talked about how someone would always start by saying something that sounded concerned, something like, "I'm just worried about them," or "I think they're going through something." But it was never about worry. It was about building a case, about creating a narrative that positioned you as unstable, unreliable, too much, too emotional, too intense, too anything that would make people question your truth before you even spoke it. They rehearsed their responses to things you hadn't even said yet. They prepared counter-narratives for situations that hadn't happened. They built an entire false reality around you and then invited others into it, one person at a time, until you were surrounded by people who believed a version of you that never existed. And the worst part, the part that's going to hit you like a brick, is that while they were doing all this, they were still showing up in your life with smiles. They were still texting you, still laughing at your jokes, still acting like nothing had changed. They perfected the art of the double life, one face for you and one face for the meetings. They became experts at looking you in the eye while holding a knife behind their back. The confessors said they used to practice it, used to remind each other to keep it normal when you were around, to make sure their faces didn't betray the fact that they had just spent hours tearing you apart in private. They turned deception into a skill, and they got so good at it that you never suspected a thing, never felt the betrayal happening in real time because they made sure the blade was always just out of your sight. But the meetings were just the beginning, because what they did next is where it gets truly disgusting. They didn't just talk about you in private, they coordinated a campaign against your reputation. The confessor revealed that they created what they called talking points, specific phrases and stories they would all use when speaking to mutual friends, family members, anyone in your orbit. They made sure everyone heard the same version of events, the same carefully crafted narrative that painted you as the problem while they positioned themselves as the concerned, caring, patient ones who had tried so hard to help you. It was psychological warfare disguised as friendship, and they executed it with the precision of people who had done this before. They had assignments, actual roles they played in this operation. One person was designated as the voice of reason, the one who would express sympathy for you while subtly planting doubt about your mental state. Another was the evidence collector, the one who would screenshot your posts, save your messages, document your every move so they could present it later as proof of whatever narrative they were building. Someone else played the mediator, the person who would reach out to you occasionally with fake concern, asking if you were okay, not because they cared, but because they needed fresh material for the next meeting. And there was always the amplifier, the one whose job was to make sure the story spread beyond your immediate circle, to whisper the narrative into the ears of people who barely knew you, but would now form their entire opinion of you based on coordinated lies. The confessor broke down crying when they described their own role in all this, how they had volunteered to be the one who stayed closest to you, who maintained the friendship while reporting back everything you said, every vulnerable moment you shared, every private struggle you confided. They called it gathering intel, but what it really was betrayal dressed up in strategic language. They admitted that there were times you would tell them something personal, something painful, and they would nod and hug you and tell you it was going to be okay, and then they would immediately text the group with an update, turning your pain into ammunition, your vulnerability into evidence, your trust into their weapon. And the worst part, they said, was how easy it became, how quickly they stopped feeling guilty about it because the group had normalized it, had made it seem like they were doing something necessary, something protective, something justified. The confession included screenshots, actual proof of these group chats, where your name appeared hundreds of times, messages where they laughed about things you had no idea were even being discussed, conversations where they celebrated small victories in their campaign, like when someone you both knew started to distance themselves from you, or when you posted something vulnerable and they knew they could use it against you later. They treated your life like a game, your reputation like a ball they could toss around between them, your feelings like something irrelevant to their strategy. And reading through these messages, seeing the timestamps, realizing these conversations were happening on days when they were still texting you, thinking of you and here if you need anything, it's enough to make you question everything you thought you knew about human nature. Now let's talk about the specific tactics they used, because this is where the confession gets truly disturbing. They didn't just spread lies. They engineered situations designed to make you look unstable. The confessor described something they called provocation protocols, deliberate actions meant to trigger emotional responses from you that they could then use as evidence of your instability. They would say things designed to upset you, then act shocked when you reacted. They would withhold information, change plans last minute, exclude you from events, all while watching to see how you'd respond, hoping you'd break down so they could point to your reaction as proof of everything they'd been saying about you. One particularly evil tactic they used was what the confessor called the setup, where they would create situations that had no good outcome for you. They would invite you to gatherings where everyone had already been briefed on the narrative against you, where people were primed to interpret everything you did through a negative lens. You could be quiet and they'd call you withdrawn and antisocial. You could be engaged and they'd call you attention-seeking and desperate. You could tell a joke and they'd call you inappropriate. You could be serious and they'd call you too intense. There was no version of you that would be acceptable, because acceptance was never the goal. Validation of their predetermined narrative was. And after these events, they would have follow-up meetings where they would dissect your behavior, finding evidence to support their case in every single thing you did or didn't do. They also admitted to something called isolation engineering, where they systematically worked to separate you from anyone who might support you or see through their manipulation. They would plant seeds of doubt about you with mutual friends, subtle comments that sounded like concern but were designed to make people question your judgment, your stability, your version of events. They would volunteer to check in with people after they spent time with you, supposedly to see how you were doing, but really to reinforce their narrative and make sure no competing truth could take root. They created an echo chamber around you where every voice except yours was saying the same thing, and they did it so gradually, so carefully, that you didn't even notice your support system dissolving until it was already gone. The confessor revealed that they had actually studied manipulation tactics, that some members of the group had researched psychological techniques specifically to use against you. They learned about gaslighting, triangulation, projection, and they implemented these strategies deliberately. They would deny things they had clearly said, making you question your memory. They would play people against each other while positioning themselves as neutral parties. They would accuse you of the exact behaviors they were engaged in, projecting their toxicity onto you so thoroughly that you started to believe maybe you were the problem. And the most disturbing part is that they knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't acting out of ignorance or misunderstanding. They were consciously, deliberately, methodically working to destabilize your sense of reality. So why did they do it? What could possibly motivate a group of people to invest this much energy, this much time, this much calculated cruelty into destroying someone's reputation and mental peace? The confessor's answer to this question is perhaps the most revealing part of the entire confession. They said it started with envy, pure, unfiltered jealousy that none of them wanted to admit they felt. You had something they didn't, whether it was confidence, authenticity, success, genuine happiness, the ability to be yourself without apology. Whatever it was, it made them feel small by comparison. Jesse, they feared you. And instead of dealing with their own insecurities, instead of working on themselves or simply stepping back from the friendship, they decided to tear you down to their level. But it wasn't just envy, the confessor explained. It became something darker. It became a bonding activity, a shared mission that gave their relationships purpose and intensity. They formed a tribe united by a common enemy, and that enemy was you. Their friendships with each other deepened through their mutual participation in your destruction. They had inside jokes about you, shared secrets about the campaign, moments of celebration when a tactic worked. You became the glue that held them together, the project that gave them something to focus on besides their own empty lives. And the more invested they became in the narrative they'd created, the more they had to defend it. Because admitting they were wrong would mean facing the monstrous thing they had collectively become. The confessor also revealed something that might be the hardest thing to hear. Some of them genuinely convinced themselves they were doing the right thing. They had told the lie so many times, reinforced it so consistently among themselves, that they started to believe it. They created an alternate reality where you were actually the villain, where their actions were justified, where they were somehow the victims or the heroes protecting others from you. They built an entire mythology around their betrayal that absolved them of guilt and allowed them to sleep at night. The human mind's capacity for self-deception is terrifying, and they exploited it fully, rewriting history in real time until they couldn't even remember that the story had started as a fabrication. And here's the truly sick part. The confessor admitted that there were moments when some of them had doubts, times when someone would say, maybe we're going too far, or I'm starting to feel bad about this. But those doubts were always shut down by the group. They had created a culture where questioning the narrative was seen as betrayal, where showing compassion for you was treated as weakness or naivety. They reinforced each other's worst impulses, talked each other out of guilt, reminded each other of the story they'd agreed upon whenever someone's conscience started to surface. They became a cult with a single doctrine. You were the problem, and anything they did in response to that problem was justified. It's a level of collective delusion that would be almost impressive if it wasn't so absolutely disgusting. Now here's what happens next. Because this confession doesn't just expose them, it liberates you. Every moment of confusion you felt, every time you questioned yourself, every instance where you thought maybe you were being too sensitive or reading too much into things, all of it now makes perfect sense. You weren't paranoid. You were picking up on something real. Your instincts were screaming at you that something was wrong, and you were right. The gaslighting didn't work completely, because some part of you, some inner knowing they couldn't reach, held on to the truth. And now that truth has been validated in the most concrete way possible, through the confession of someone who was there, who participated, who kept records. But here's what they didn't account for. Here's the flaw in their entire operation. While they were busy trying to destroy you, you were busy becoming someone they could never touch. While they were having meetings about you, you were building yourself in silence. While they were crafting narratives, you were living your truth. While they were investing all their energy into tearing you down, you were investing your energy into rising above anything they could possibly do to you. They made you their full-time project, and in doing so, they revealed that their entire existence had become about you, while your existence had nothing to do with them. You already won, and this confession is just the universe's way of making sure you know it. The confessor said something that should bring you immense satisfaction. They're terrified now. Now that the truth is out, now that the confession exists, they're panicking. They're scrambling to control the damage, reaching out to people, trying to get ahead of the story, suddenly concerned about how they'll be perceived. The same people who spent years carefully crafting a false narrative about you are now desperate to craft a narrative about themselves, one where they're not the villains this confession makes them out to be. They're experiencing a fraction of what they put you through. The paranoia, the fear of judgment, the anxiety about reputation. And unlike you, they actually deserve it because their reputation is based on lies, and yours never was. And here's your power in all this. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to seek revenge. You don't have to expose them publicly. You don't have to confront anyone or demand apologies. The truth is already working on your behalf, spreading through the same networks they once used against you, changing minds, shifting perceptions, revealing them for what they are. Your vindication doesn't require your effort because it's built on facts, on evidence, on confession. Their destruction is inevitable because it's built on lies that have now been exposed. You can simply continue living your life, being your authentic self, thriving in your truth, while they crumble under the weight of theirs. That's the beautiful irony of this whole situation. They spent years trying to destroy you and ended up destroying themselves. But let's go even deeper, because there's a truth here that transcends this specific situation. A truth about people and power and what happens when someone refuses to be broken. The reason they targeted you, the reason they invested so much energy into trying to tear you down, is because you represented something they couldn't control. You were authentic in a world of performance. You were genuine in a world of facades. You had the courage to be yourself while they were busy being whoever they thought would get them approval. Your very existence was a mirror reflecting their own inauthenticity, and instead of using that mirror to grow, they tried to shatter it. This is what always happens to people who refuse to play the game, who won't compromise their truth for comfort, who insist on being real in spaces that reward pretense. The system, the group, the collective mediocrity, it always tries to eliminate the ones who remind everyone else what integrity looks like. They can't let you thrive because your thriving exposes their compromise. They can't let you succeed on your own terms because your success questions their sacrifice. They can't let you be happy being yourself because your happiness reveals that all their contortions and calculations and careful image management were unnecessary. You're living proof that there's another way, and that scares them more than anything else ever could. The confession reveals this truth in stark detail. Multiple people in these group chats expressed frustration that you didn't seem affected by their tactics, that you kept going like nothing was wrong, that you still seemed happy despite everything they were doing. They were furious that their campaign wasn't working the way they wanted, that you weren't collapsing under the weight of their manipulation. Welcome back, you beautiful contradictions, you walking paradoxes, you smiling assassins who learn to weaponize kindness. They're still trying to figure you out, aren't they? Still trying to understand how someone so soft could be so lethal, how someone with angel eyes could have demon strategy, how you smiled at them with warmth while simultaneously dismantling their entire game plan 3 moves ahead. They thought your gentleness was weakness, your patience was ignorance, your silence was surrender. But what they failed to realize, what they couldn't possibly comprehend, is that you weren't playing checkers while they played chess. You were playing chess while they were still learning how to spell the word. Let's talk about that smile, shall we? That beautiful, disarming, absolutely devastating smile. They saw it and thought innocent. They saw it and thought harmless. They saw it and thought easy target. They looked at your face and made the fatal mistake of thinking your exterior matched your interior. They thought the softness of your features meant softness in your mind. They thought the light in your eyes meant light in your intentions. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't see, is that smile wasn't a greeting. It was a warning. It was the calm before the storm. It was the silence before the explosion. That smile was you saying, "Go ahead, underestimate me. I dare you. You see, they expected aggression. They were prepared for confrontation. They had their defenses ready for someone who would come at them with fire and fury. But you came with flowers and left them in ruins. You came with kindness and left them confused. You came with grace and left them completely destroyed. Because while they were busy preparing for war, you were busy winning it. While they were sharpening their swords, you were poisoning their water supply. While they were learning the rules, you were rewriting them. And all the while, that smile never faded. That beautiful, terrifying, absolutely lethal smile that said, I'm 3 timelines ahead of you, and you don't even know the game has started. They thought they were playing against an amateur, but they were playing against a master who'd learned to hide their expertise behind humility. They thought they were facing someone naive, but they were facing someone who'd weaponized their own underestimation. You let them think you didn't understand the game. You let them believe you were too kind to play dirty. You let them assume your morals would be your downfall. And that's exactly how you won. Because while they were busy monologuing about their superiority, you were quietly capturing their queen. While they were celebrating moves they thought were brilliant, you were setting traps they wouldn't see until it was far too late. You played the long game while they were focused on instant gratification. You sacrificed pawns they thought were victories while protecting the pieces that actually mattered. And here's the part that breaks them the most. You never changed your expression. You never showed your hand. You never let them see the calculation behind those gentle eyes. You smiled through every move, every counter, every devastating play that left them scrambling. They kept waiting for you to show your true colors, but your true color was always this: a player so advanced they made mastery look like mercy. A strategist so skilled they made warfare look like kindness. A mind so sharp it could cut through their ego without them even feeling the blade, until they were already bleeding out on the board. Remember when they first saw you? Remember that moment when they looked at you and thought they had you figured out in 3 seconds flat? They saw the warmth in your presence and cataloged you as soft. They heard the gentleness in your voice and filed you under pushover. They witnessed your patience and labeled you passive. They made a fundamental error that would cost them everything. They confused your choice not to engage with an inability to compete. They mistook your strategic silence for confusion. They interpreted your careful observation as hesitation. But you were doing something they couldn't comprehend. You were studying them like a scientist studies bacteria under a microscope, cataloging every weakness, noting every pattern, memorizing every tell. While they were busy talking, you were listening. While they were busy showing off, you were learning. While they were busy celebrating their perceived dominance, you were building a complete psychological profile of every single one of them. You knew how they thought before they thought it. You could predict their moves before they made them. You understood their motivations better than they understood themselves. And all of this knowledge, all of this insight, all of this devastating awareness, you kept hidden behind that smile. That patient, understanding, completely disarming smile that made them feel safe while you were constructing their downfall, piece by piece, move by move, breath by breath. They made jokes about you, didn't they? Behind your back they laughed. To your face they patronized. They treated you like a child who'd stumbled into an adult conversation. They explained things you already understood better than they ever would. They offered advice you'd already surpassed years ago, and you let them. You let them feel superior. You let them believe their own hype. You let them think they were the smartest person in the room while you were quietly becoming the most dangerous. because you understood something they never would. Real power doesn't announce itself. True intelligence doesn't need validation. Actual mastery doesn't require an audience. You played dumb while getting smarter. You played weak while getting stronger. You played lost while mapping every single exit, entrance, and trap door in their entire operation. The beautiful irony is they thought they were teaching you the game, but you were teaching them a lesson they'd never forget. Every time they explained something condescendingly, you were learning their blind spots. Every time they underestimated your intelligence, you were cataloging their arrogance as a weakness to exploit later. Every time they dismissed your input, you were noting exactly which pieces of information they valued and which they ignored, giving you a perfect blueprint of where their defenses were strongest, and more importantly, where they were laughably weak. You turned their ego into your weapon. You transformed their pride into your ammunition. You weaponized their certainty that they were better than you, and that weapon would eventually destroy them completely. And here's what really gets them, what really keeps them up at night trying to figure out where it all went wrong. You were never playing their game. You were never following their rules. You were never even on their board. While they thought you were struggling to keep up, you were building an entirely new game they didn't even know existed. While they were celebrating winning battles, you were ending the war. While they were focused on capturing your pieces, you'd already captured something far more valuable. Their trust, their confidence, their complete and utter certainty that they knew who you were. And when you finally made your move, when you finally showed them what you'd been building this entire time, the shock on their faces was worth every second of being underestimated. The confusion in their eyes when they realized they'd been playing checkers against someone who'd been orchestrating a military campaign was the sweetest victory you'd ever tasted. Let's talk about what was happening behind that smile, shall we? Because while your face showed kindness, your mind was running calculations that would make quantum computers jealous. Every conversation was data collection. Every interaction was reconnaissance. Every seemingly casual question was strategic intelligence gathering, disguised as friendly curiosity. They thought you were making small talk, but you were building psychological dossiers. They thought you were being polite, but you were identifying pressure points. They thought you were just naturally curious, but you were mapping their entire mental architecture, finding every crack, every weakness, every point of structural failure that you could exploit when the time was right. You listened to their stories and learned their fears. You watched their reactions and discovered their triggers. You noted who they respected, who they dismissed, who they loved, who they hated, and most importantly, who they underestimated. Besides you, you cataloged their speech patterns to predict their thinking patterns. You studied their body language to understand their unspoken truths. You paid attention to what they didn't say, because the silences told you more than their words ever could. And all of this information, this massive database of human behavior and psychological vulnerability, you processed in real time while maintaining that gentle, harmless, absolutely devastating smile that kept them completely off guard. They never suspected a thing, because you'd mastered the art of looking exactly how they wanted you to look. When they needed someone soft, you appeared soft. When they needed someone confused, you appeared confused. When they needed someone to dismiss, you gave them every reason to dismiss you. You became a mirror reflecting back exactly what would make them most comfortable, most confident, most catastrophically wrong about who they were dealing with. You studied their egos like a mechanic studies an engine, learning exactly which parts needed stroking, which needed challenging, which needed ignoring to keep the machine running exactly how you needed it to run. And here's the genius of your approach. You never once lied. You never once pretended to be something you weren't. You simply allowed them to make assumptions while you strategically chose which parts of yourself to reveal and which to keep hidden. You let them see your kindness, but not your strategy. You showed them your patience, but not your calculation. You displayed your gentleness, but concealed your ruthlessness. You were always exactly who you were, but you controlled the narrative of their perception so masterfully, they thought they knew you when they'd only seen the tip of an iceberg that could sink their entire fleet. The calculation never stopped. Even in moments of genuine connection, even in times of real vulnerability, even when you actually cared about them, there was always a part of your mind running the numbers, adjusting the strategy, preparing for contingencies, not because you're cold, but because you learn the hard way that the world doesn't reward naivety. You learn that kindness without awareness is weak. You learned that trust without verification is stupidity. So you became someone who could be genuinely warm while simultaneously being strategically brilliant. Someone who could care about people while also being prepared for them to betray you. Someone who could smile with real affection while keeping 3 backup plans in your pocket, just in case that affection wasn't returned with equal loyalty. Now we arrive at the beautiful part. The moment when all that patience, all that observation, all that strategic silence starts paying dividends they never saw coming. You'd been building this trap for months, maybe years, and they walked into it thinking it was a garden party. Every piece was positioned perfectly. Every escape route was covered. Every contingency was planned for. And they had absolutely no idea they were already captured, already defeated, already finished. They were still making moves thinking they were winning while you'd already declared checkmate 3 different ways they hadn't noticed yet. You gave them exactly what they wanted. If they needed to feel superior, you gave them opportunities to feel superior. If they needed to feel intelligent, you asked questions that let them explain things. If they needed to feel powerful, you showed deference that fed their ego until it was so bloated they could barely see past it. You turned their desires into chains. You transformed their needs into traps. You weaponized their hunger for validation and used it to lead them exactly where you needed them to be. And the entire time, that smile never wavered. That gentle, patient, absolutely lethal smile that said, "Keep going. You're doing exactly what I need you to do." The beauty of your trap is it didn't look like a trap. It looked like weakness. It looked like opportunity. It looked like an easy win. So they rushed in without checking for wires, without testing the ground, without questioning why someone who seemed so harmless was suddenly so accessible. They were so focused on what they thought they were taking from you that they never noticed what you were taking from them. Their time, their resources, their attention, their trust, their secrets, their power. You were redistributing everything they had while they were busy thinking they were exploiting you. You were dismantling their entire operation while they were celebrating what they thought was your downfall. And here's where your genius really shows. You didn't just trap them, you made them trap themselves. Every move they made to exploit you was actually a move that strengthened your position. Every attempt to manipulate you was actually them walking deeper into your manipulation. Every time they thought they were playing you, they were actually playing themselves. You turned their own strategy against them so completely they're still trying to figure out where their plan ended and yours began. You made them feel like puppet masters while you held every single string, and they pulled themselves into knots, thinking they were pulling yours. The timing was perfect because you'd been patient enough to wait for the exact right moment, not too early when they might still be cautious, not too late when they might have moved on. You waited until they were completely committed, completely invested, completely convinced of their superiority. You waited until their guard was at its lowest, because their confidence was at its highest. You waited until they'd bet everything on you being who they thought you were. And then, and only then, did you start showing them who you actually are. Not all at once. That would be too merciful. Slowly, gradually, with that same patient smile, you began revealing that the angel they thought they knew had always been playing chess while they were still trying to figure out which piece was the king. The moment they realized what you'd done, that moment when the pieces finally clicked into place and they understood they'd been outplayed from the very beginning, that's the moment they'll remember for the rest of their lives. You watched their faces shift from confusion to recognition to horror to respect to fear, all in the span of seconds. You saw the exact instant when their perception of you shattered and reformed into something they should have seen all along. You witnessed their reality cracking as they understood that every assumption they'd made was wrong. Every conclusion they'd drawn was manipulated. Every victory they'd celebrated was actually a step deeper into your strategy. They went back through every interaction in their minds, didn't they? Replaying conversations with new understanding, seeing the game within the game, recognizing the traps they'd walked into while thinking they were setting them. Every kind word you'd spoken suddenly had layers they hadn't considered. Every gentle suggestion suddenly looked like strategic positioning. Every moment of apparent vulnerability suddenly revealed itself as calculated exposure that got them exactly where you needed them. A 9, a kid, and all just results. All just makes. They're all just miss. They realized you hadn't been reacting to their moves, you'd been directing them. You hadn't been playing defense, you'd been conducting an orchestra. And every note they'd played, even the ones they thought were improvised, had been written in your score from the beginning. The questions started pouring out. How long were you planning this? Longer than you think. When did you know? Probably before you even introduced yourself. Was any of it real? The parts that mattered were, but you'll never know which parts those were. Why didn't I see this coming? Because you were too busy looking down at me to notice I was looking right through you. The interrogation in their eyes was desperate, trying to salvage some sense of control, some piece of ego, some shred of the narrative where they were still the intelligent ones and you were still the naive one they believed in. But that narrative was gone, burned, completely obliterated by the reality that they'd been intellectually and strategically dominated by someone they dismissed as harmless. And here's what breaks them beyond repair. You're not angry. You're not vindictive. You're not cruel about your victory. You're still smiling that same gentle smile, but now they understand what it means. Now they recognize it for what it always was, not kindness mistaken for weakness, but power wrapped in patience. You're not celebrating their defeat because you never saw this as a competition. To compete with them would require you to see them as equals. And you stopped seeing them that way the moment they underestimated you. You were never trying to beat them, you were teaching them a lesson about assumptions, about ego, about the danger of judging a player by their appearance rather than their performance. They want you to gloat. They're waiting for the villain monologue where you explain your brilliance and mock their stupidity. But you won't give them that either, because you understand something they never will. Real power doesn't need to announce itself. True victory doesn't require acknowledgement. Actual mastery speaks through results, not explanations. So you just smile, that devastating smile they finally understand, and you let the board speak for itself. Checkmate. Game over. Lesson learned. They really do. And the most terrifying part for them is knowing that if you could do this once, if you could orchestrate this entire operation while appearing harmless, what else have you done? What else are you capable of? What other games are you playing right now that they don't even know exist? Now, they can't look at anyone the same way. You've fundamentally altered how they perceive the world. Because you shattered their confidence in their own judgment. Every person they meet now, they wonder, are they playing me like that? Every kind gesture they receive, they question the motivation.